I call the meeting of the San Juan Unified School District Board of Education to order. Due to the executive orders issued by Governor Newsom due to the COVID-19 outbreak, tonight's meeting is being conducted via the Zoom platform. The meeting is being audio and video recorded, and the recording may capture sounds and images of those attending this meeting. The recording will be posted on the district website. To help manage bandwidth and ensure a smooth experience, we ask that attendees leave their video cameras disabled unless they're offering a public comment. You will be invited to start your video during public comment. We thank you for joining us and ask for your patience as we use this format in an effort to maximize access and participation during this time of social distancing and other restrictions. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance led by Dr. McKibben.
I pledge allegiance, to the flag of the
United States of America
and to the
republic
for which it
stands,
one
nation,
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
With liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Good evening and welcome. I am Paula Viesquez, Board President. Joining me tonight is Dr. Michael McKibben, Board Vice President, Ms. Zima Creason, Board Clerk, and Ms. Pam Costa and Mr. Saul Hernandez, Board members. Superintendent Kern and other staff members are also in attendance. Before we begin, I'd like to review the two methods that are available to submit public comments for tonight's meeting. You may send an email to boardcomment@sanjuan.edu. Again, that's boardcomment, all one word, @sanjuan.edu. Comments that were emailed before 6 p.m. today have already been shared with all board members. Comments emailed after 6 p.m. tonight, including those submitted during the meeting, may be read during the meeting depending on time restrictions. Comments may only be submitted on an agenda item up until the time that the agenda item has been discussed. The second option is on the Zoom platform, where you may use the raise your hand feature. When you are called on, you may share a comment via audio during the meeting. Please note that all comments are subject to a 2-minute limit, or approximately 300 words for written comments. And at the time that's appropriate, Mr. Allen will also be going over the raise your hand feature for those of us here on the Zoom platform. With that, we are at item B, approval of the minutes. Are there any corrections to the minutes? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the minutes for April 14th?
So moved.
It's been moved by Dr. McKibben, seconded by Ms. Creason. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
That was unanimous. We are at item C, organizations and announcements. Mr. Allen, do we have any reports from staff, board appointed district committees, employee organizations, or other district committee organizations?
We have one comment from an employee organization, Ms. Karen Smith with CSEA. Give me one moment. Ms. Smith, your microphone is unmuted if you would like to begin.
Good evening, President Velasquez, members of the board, Mr. Kern and Ms. Cunningham. Just wanted to share with the board an email that was forwarded to me today. This was from Larry Doney. He's a special education department chair. And he said, I just need to say again, just a bit louder, our IAs are going above and beyond the support of our students. I can not say enough about the incredible work they are all doing. So I just thought it was important to share that, because I know a lot of people had concerns about what IAs could be doing from home remotely. And a lot of them are doing the Zoom calls with the students one-on-one. So they're getting a lot of individualized attention. So that's all I had to say. I just wanted to share that email that I got today.
Thank you very much for sharing and for joining us. It's lovely to see you.
No, thanks.
Have a great afternoon.
You too.
We're at item D, visitor comments. Mr. Allen, will you please give instructions to those in attendance via Zoom on how they can raise their hand if they have a comment at this time? Oh, actually, were there any other comments for that previous section? I realized I just kind of went over. No other staff reports or employee organizations, correct?
There are not.
Then we are on visitor comments indeed. Thank you.
We are, and I'd be happy to give instructions. To our attendees, this portion of the meeting is for public comment on topics that do not appear on tonight's agenda. If you'd like to offer thoughts about an item that is on tonight's agenda, we would ask that you hold your comment until that agenda item is called. If you'd like to make a comment on a topic that is not on the agenda, we would ask that you raise your hand at this time. The raise hand button can be found in different locations depending on how you have joined the meeting tonight. And let me see if I can. So
I
if
don't
you
see any raised hands at the moment. Sorry. Oh, there you go. Oh, you're sharing screen and everything. Well done. Take it away. Sorry.
So if you have joined us tonight via the Zoom app for a desktop computer or a web browser, please locate the participants button down below on your toolbar. When you click that, it will give you your participants list, typically off to the right. It can be in a new window as well. And on that participants list, you will see the raise hand button. That is how you will raise your hand. If you are on a Zoom app for a cell phone or other mobile device, it will look more like this area over here to the right. And you will look for the raise hand button down on your toolbar directly. Sometimes on some phones, you will also have to click the little more button, and it will be in there as well. If you click that raise button, hand button, that will let us know that you would like to speak. And finally, if you've joined us tonight by dialing in via phone, you may raise your hand by dialing *9 on your keypad. If you'd like to offer a comment on an item that is not on tonight's agenda, please raise your hand now. We will call on you, your microphone will be unmuted, and you may display your video feed if you desire for your comment of up to 2 minutes.
So we do have one raised hand from Holly, and just before Holly begins, Mr. Allen, are you in receipt of any comments at this time that need to be read, or are we just using the raise hand function at this time?
Let me double check. I believe all of our comments we've received via email are for one of our agenda items.
Okay, that matches mine as well. Let me know if that's any different. So we'll start with Holly, and then if anybody else would like to speak, please indicate so by raising your hand. Holly, go ahead.
I'm sorry, actually I didn't read the agenda item, so that my bad. So is the
that's okay, we're all learning with the platform. Do you want to wait for the item, or did you want to give comment here?
Is the subject of the voting for board members as a neighborhood basis or on the agenda?
Yeah, so that's item G2. That's one of our business items that we will be taking up at a later time during this meeting. Do you want to speak at that moment? Okay.
Yeah, I'll wait and talk then.
Okay,
thank you.
Sounds good. Okay, no worries. I'll give folks one more moment. I'm not seeing anybody else raising their hands, but we'll wait a moment to see if anyone comes forward. Yes?
We have had one email come in that is of a general nature. It's actually just a very short question that I will certainly have staff get back to this person on, from Katie Sanchez, who is asking, what is the enrollment process now for incoming kindergarten students, including students on a transfer waiting list for the 2020-2021 school year?
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Allen. I'm gonna pause a couple more beats and wait for another raised hand, and after that, we will move on. Going once, going twice. Okay, with that, we will move forward with our agenda. We are now at item E, the consent calendar. Mr. Allen, do we have any public comments for items that are on the consent calendar?
We have had no emails for comment on consent items. Again, if there's anybody who has joined us via the Zoom meeting today and you would like to comment on a consent item, we would ask that you raise your hand at this time.
Okay, seeing no raised hands. Do any board members wish to remove any items from the consent calendar? I would actually like to pull item E5, resolution number 2988, to submit a FEMA request for public assistance. Is there a motion to approve items E1 through E4 and items E6 and E7?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Creason. Is there a second?
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. McKibben. It's been moved by Ms. Creason and seconded by Dr. McKibben. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. That was unanimous. Item E5 was pulled from the consent calendar. I pulled this item out of an abundance of caution, and during the course of my regular employment, I am charged with reviewing some of the FEMA public assistance requests and wanted to make sure that there was absolutely no conflict there. So I will be refraining from voting on this item. Is there a motion to approve item E5?
So moved.
It's been moved by Dr. McKibben. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been seconded by Ms. Costa. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? None. Any abstentions? I will be abstaining. The vote was 4-0 to 1. Thank you. We are now at our first business item, G1, early learning update. Ms. Townsend Snyder, please begin when you are ready.
Nicole, you can go ahead and screen share.
I need access to screen share. Trent, oh, there we go.
Thanks, Nicole. Good evening, Board President Villescaz, members of the board, and Superintendent Kern. Thank you so much for allowing us to share with you tonight this early learning update. We're super excited to share our newest journey, which was born out of our continued work in literacy as we support reading for our youngest learners. We will also share with you, as a part of this presentation, an exciting new journey about a literacy bridge we are beginning to build from ECE to TK to K. As we planned this presentation for you, we had not yet experienced this COVID school closure, so we thought it would be helpful to add a few things and share with you updates as to how this work is continuing in our virtual classroom environment, in addition to our professional learning plans, even now after only 1 week of distance learning in our elementary division. Joining me tonight for this presentation are the folks who have been heavily involved in the journey of this work. Nicole Kukral, Program Specialist, Arlene Good, Early Learning Support Resource Teacher, Mark Fleming, Kindergarten Teacher, and also joining us tonight are two of our amazing TOSAs, Esther Lynn Murray and Jenny Rickers. Our presentation this evening is a small little pivot from a typical early learning update that we share with you, and we hope you thoroughly enjoy a little glimpse into our future hopes, our current work, and what we've learned along the way. Okay, Nicole. Each year we share with you our progress in guided reading by sharing our growth specific related to the K2 running record data. So in September, we presented running record data, which showed that 58% of our students were reading at or above grade level, while 30% were not. And at that time, we shared that these data points were stable for the past 3 years. At the end of trimester 2 of this year, which is when we collected our most recent running record data, and also the last day of school prior to shutdown, we saw that 52% of our K2 students were at or above standard. And this too is stable over the past 3 years, meaning looking exactly the same. Due to the COVID interruption, we will not have trimester 3 data to share with you on the running records. Another important piece of data that we typically present is the number of schools that we have engaged in the guided reading professional learning work. We now have 38 of our 42 schools in guided reading professional learning for grades K through 2. And of those 38 schools, all but 4 have completed their cycles of PD, and those remaining 4 will finish within the next 2 years. So the work in guided reading is continuing to play in the background as an important component of teaching reading. Guided reading, as you know, has been one of our guiding lights for much of the literacy work we've been doing for the past 7 years. Also continuing to play alongside guided reading is our literacy work with Benchmark as our English language arts adoption, as you know. We continue to support teachers in both of these endeavors and with Benchmark by folding in the use of materials into what we call our Benchmark and Beyond professional learning cohorts, where cohorts of teachers gather to study best practices and materials for the implementation of the adoption. Our look at the historical running record data that I just shared with you over those past 3 years really served as a quantitative check engine light, and it was the catalyst for us to pursue our next journey in teaching reading. The running record data also was one of the components that prompted practitioners and our team to dig a lot deeper and gather information as we continued to ask questions through our continuous improvement lens. And what we learned from them was that the teachers recognized a few gaps in the work that they were doing, and they noticed that their kids really needed an additional layer of support. And you'll hear us tonight refer to that layer of support as another thread to the rope of becoming a skilled reader. This information that we heard and learned from the teachers quickly served as another data point for us, and it was our second authentic but qualitative check engine light. So with these 2 check engine lights signaling, we knew we needed to ask more questions and get right to work. So as our team continued to listen and implement book studies and learning opportunities to gain more knowledge together, it became even more clear that what was missing was the strong phonological awareness component to our reading instruction. So this move to distance learning and the model that we're in right now has really given us an opportunity to exist with a sharpened focus on continuous improvement, where planning with our end users in mind has shifted not only to listening to their input and getting feedback, but letting them be a large part of our decision making and a critical part of our process and planning. We believe that what we're learning right now in distance learning will truly make us stronger when we're all back together in our classrooms. This work is amazing. We akin it to a volcano where it's been quietly bubbling underneath the surface, and now it seems to be exploding, and we're so excited to share what we know with you as of now. Go ahead, Nicole. So what makes this newest work in phonological awareness such a powerful addition to our work in guided reading and Benchmark is really how it began with this expressed need by the teachers based on what they were seeing in their students' success. This newest move is not a program, it's not an initiative, it is a grassroots movement that is impacting professional practice and student learning quite profoundly. Our check engine lights, both the qualitative and the quantitative that I mentioned earlier, did lead us to ask questions about the work we were doing. So we began to ask ourselves, what's working, what's missing, how are we supporting these gaps and our youngest, most vulnerable learners? How can we build on the work we have already started with Benchmark and guided reading? And now, especially in this distance learning model, how can we support our students and teachers through distance learning? As we share more about our very, very humble beginnings in this work, you will hear about a brand new bridge that is being built between preschool, so our ECE division, TK and K teachers. And while this work is brand new and seems little at the moment, it is really one of the most profound components that we'll share with you tonight. We also hope that phonological awareness is a visible thread in the rope of reading, and that we give you some context to what it looks like in classrooms tonight. You will have an opportunity to hear from teachers and administrators alike around their thoughts and questions that we ask them. So with that, I'd like to pass to Nicole Kukral to share with you more about our journey in this work and how we're improving upon the model that we currently exist in. Nicole.
Thank you, Amberly. As Amberly mentioned, data is and always has been a really critical and central part of this work. And when we had the opportunity to reflect on our data, both current year data and also data trends across time, we really noticed that despite our best efforts with benchmark and guided reading and all the deep, meaningful work that was occurring there, we still had students that weren't making progress in the way that we hoped. And so, of course, that led us to reflect on our practice and on our process and ask ourselves questions. Most specifically, we wanted to understand what was working for the students who were making progress and what was a missing piece for students who remained at the same level, sometimes even after a year or two. And at the same time that we were reflecting on these questions, our practitioners were as well. And they wanted to know how could they either leverage pieces of benchmark to support more forward movement with students where they hadn't seen the kind of progress that they hoped, or what additional pieces of instruction, what additional practices could they enter into their practice in order to move students forward and help them make progress. And of course, all of this is under the most meaningful question that we ask ourselves, which is how are we interrupting predictable patterns of failure for our most vulnerable learners? So what we knew based on preliminary conversations with teachers as we engaged in this reflective process is that they really needed support with foundational skills. That was an area of the standards that our teachers had felt they hadn't been putting as much attention on it in recent years, and our professional learning hadn't been highlighting it as much in recent years. And so though we had been engaging in some early research around foundational skills based on these conversations and some really early work around foundational skills with teachers across the grade levels, not just in TK2, but also in TK5, the work began to gain momentum in the spring of 2018 when a group of TK2 teachers came together in a professional book study around a text by Wiley Blevins. As they engaged in that reflective process through their research and their reading of that text, it really uncovered the need for a more explicit focus on phonological awareness for our TK2 teachers. And so that's where we decided to move forward in terms of a professional learning focus. So as we responded to those needs and all of the learning that our entire team was doing, really three paths began to emerge in terms of the actions that we needed to take. So number one was an instructional path. Number two was a path related to instructional materials. And then number three was a leadership path. In terms of the instructional path, that was where we engaged in continued reading research through book studies. And again, even though the focus, of course, tonight is on early reading, that was really occurring with the entire elementary span of TK through 5. And we had two organized professional learning cohorts of practitioners where they not only read research, but also applied that research to their instructional practice, and then came together with data and artifacts from their classroom to really look and reflect with each other about the changes that learning was making on not only their instructional practice, but also on their student learning. Through those opportunities that teachers had to collaborate and learn together, another path emerged, and that was one around materials. So some of our teachers had shared some ideas about resources that they had been using in the classroom to teach phonological awareness with some success. And these are teachers that had been using these materials for quite some time. And so, of course, as the rest of our practitioners kind of learned the importance of phonological awareness, everybody was really excited to hear more about these materials. And all of a sudden, what started as like a couple people sharing these resources at a professional learning setting turned into sites wanting to study the materials together, wanting their administrators to buy them, wanting to figure out how to use them in the classroom. And so professional learning communities started to pop up all over the district. And that's really where the leadership came in. So certainly we continue to offer district level support through professional learning cohorts and also supporting sites in their learning. But what was really exciting is that at least 20 different schools, teachers began leading professional learning with their colleagues based on what they were learning in the professional learning that they engaged in with us. So that was something that created much more enthusiasm, and it grew this work even faster, and it created this grassroots movement feel that Amberly expressed to you at the beginning. What's even more exciting is that even in this climate of distance learning, when we are changing everything about the way that we do our work, this work has continued. Anecdotally, we've already heard that teachers are adapting these practices to their distance learning environments, either through their virtual classrooms or through synchronous opportunities to engage in students. And this week, we are beginning professional learning again around phonological awareness, and offering opportunities for teachers to collaborate and learn together to figure out what some very promising practices are in terms of engaging students in phonological awareness activities, even though they're not in the classroom together. So that's been something unexpected and also very exciting, and it really speaks to the excitement and energy around the work. In a few moments, Amberly is going to take you on a virtual field trip into some classrooms. And before she does that, we really wanted to make sure that we contextualize that work for you. So what you have in front of you is a graphic that we share with all of our teachers as they begin this work and as they begin to understand the research. This is a graphic called Scarborough's Rope. You'll see it is divided into two sections. The top part is language comprehension, the bottom part word recognition. Language comprehension are really the skills that drive meaning making of text. And when we think about the work that we've been engaged in for the last several years, benchmark and guided reading sit primarily within this language comprehension area. What the work that we've been engaged in around phonological awareness really sits within this word recognition area. So this work helps students become automatic, fluent decoders of words on the page so that they're able to see the words and automatically recognize what they are, which of course is also a critical part of learning to read. What's wonderful about this rope is that it shows that all of these skills are intertwined. They're all important. They're all dependent on each other. And that's something that we have really paid attention to in the professional learning that we've offered to teachers. So while phonological awareness is our focus, we also constantly make those connections to the other areas of reading. So now that you have that context, Amberly is going to share with you some classrooms. Amberly?
Sorry, I was unable to unmute myself. So it just seemed really appropriate, even now, more appropriate, to bring you all on this virtual field trip. And again, we didn't plan this as we were in COVID, but it just seems to have worked out that we're taking you on this virtual field trip. So as we were planning the presentation, we were chatting and decided that you most certainly would probably appreciate seeing what phonological awareness actually looks like so that you're able to put the term into context along with the graphic that Nicole showed you. So in addition to seeing kids participate in these phonological awareness lessons, we thought you would appreciate hearing directly from the teachers and the administrators, their thoughts and their hopes about the work. So with that, welcome to our virtual field trip.
Phonemic awareness is the oral part of phonics. So we teach letters and sounds. A means ah, but then the kids also need to know that sounds make up words, and they need to be able to stretch those out in this segment. They need to be able to blend those sounds together.
Take away, put in, get.
6 years ago, I had a struggling group of second graders, and I was doing systematic explicit phonics instruction with them, but I wasn't seeing as much progress as I wanted to see, so I started really researching.
Change wig
to dig. What are we changing it to? Dig.
When TK first started in California, we didn't have a lot of curriculum or ideas of kind of what we should be teaching. We knew we should be teaching letters and sounds. We knew we should be getting kids ready for kindergarten. There was a big missing link. I always felt like I was missing something as I was teaching. The last couple of years, the district's offered quite a few book studies and other training opportunities. And phonemic awareness kind of came out of some of that work that we've done.
Been engaged in a variety of trainings. We looked at phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, reading comprehension, and said, what are we doing to meet the needs of all those areas with our students?
I really started to see kids move when I added explicit systematic phonemic awareness to my instruction. Where I really saw it is when I started progress monitoring students, and I started being able to see if my instruction was making the growth that I wanted to see.
But this year I have a large chunk of my class that's reading in January what I would expect at the end of the year already. And I really think there's a correlation between the PA instruction and their reading level. Also, their writing has really improved. They're able to sound out letters and words and to be able to write, and that was something I didn't expect to see at this point.
Take away the and add a good. This is only about speaking when I do the line, okay? Are you ready? Good job, done.
It's been helpful for us that we've added various assessment tools and progress monitoring tools. And I think system-wide, if we took a look at what we can use to really monitor the progress of our students in acquiring the strong reading skills, then I think that would be helpful for me as a site leader.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, O, N, N, O, P.
So we really wanted to share with you what we were hearing, and what the teachers said was clearly that there was something missing, and this thread in the rope of reading was phonemic awareness. And they're asking for more now. Okay, Nicole, you can go to the next slide. So this is Mark Fleming, and each of us began our learning journey in very different ways. And mine began with two teachers who honestly taught me more in one school site visit than I could have learned on my own in an entire month, certainly. Those two people are Mark Fleming at Howe Avenue. He's a kindergarten teacher, and Shannon Faltermeyer, who's a TK teacher at Thomas Kelly. They're both such thoughtful, grounded, and caring teachers who implement the work, but really what's very important is that they're not big about jumping on the next best thing. They do things because they see a need in their students' learning. And so I couldn't imagine sharing this work without having them as a part of it. Shannon is home with her newborn baby. She just had a baby, I think it was last week. And we are super lucky to have Mark here with us, both in video in his distance learning classroom, and he's also here with us live tonight in the Zoom to answer any questions you might have at the end of the presentation, even though he's working super long hours to launch distance learning in day 7. So here we have for you Mark in a Zoom video, again from his distance learning classroom, where he'll share with you his thoughts about his journey towards phonemic awareness and really why he decided to add this layer of learning to his reading instruction, in addition to some of his hopes for the future. Okay, Nicole.
I have always wanted to be a kindergarten teacher because I think the first school experience is like the most important one of all. You know, several years ago, our school launched something called Cycle of Inquiry, where we broke down reading to its foundational skills and started collecting data and teaching to those foundational skills. What I've learned is that what we're doing is not working. That triggered, a really desperation, honestly, looking around to try and find where the gap was, what we were doing wrong, and right about that time, Arlen Good was launching a book study on phonemic awareness. Been working with Esther Lynn Murray and Susan Pack at my site to collect year-over-year data, looking at beginning year scores, looking at mid-year scores and end-year scores, and tracking students year over year. So are the students who are receiving this direct instruction in phonemic awareness in kindergarten, are they doing better than students who are not when they're fifth graders? So I think longitudinal tracking of these students is the only way to really know if this is working or if it's just another, flavor of the month. Reading a 3-page summary of this research that will take you 15 minutes, it may open your eyes that maybe there's a new way to do this. And in 7 minutes a day, you can involve your students in exercises that are fun, they're fast, the kids love them, and they just may be a really, really powerful tool. The question is, how do we get people to try it out, see how much the kids enjoy it, and then present them with real data that it works?
Mark articulates his journey so well, and that ending piece about how do we get people to try it, the grassroots movement, when it comes from them, that is how things take hold and really get moving and people try it. So Mark's journey is very much in keeping with so many of his peers who are always reflecting on their practice as well and looking towards classroom data year after year as indicators for success. I also learned that Shannon Faltmeyer is in the audience with us tonight, so I just wanted to give a shout out and a thank you to everyone who's here participating. So I want to pass the presentation along to Arlen Good, who will share with you how this work has become an amazing foundation to these brand new relationships and an opportunity to build a bridge of literacy from our elementary division to our ECE preschool teachers and students, which is something, like I said earlier, that is truly beyond exciting and has us very much looking forward to sharing our next steps with you in the upcoming school years. So with that, I want to pass on to Arlen.
Thank you, Amberly. In order to help improve preschool students' transition to kindergarten, Roxanne Mitchell and Jim Walters approached me to review the preschool articulation cards that are sent to kindergarten teachers. Very quickly, we realized the importance and challenge of this task. The challenge wasn't really about a piece of paper or an articulation process, but instead, the work was about the relationships, the trust, collaboration, communication, and professional learning that was needed to unite 3 distinct grade levels. That realization started an effort to create a vision for bridging preschool to kindergarten in a meaningful way. To begin this work, I had the opportunity to form a team to attend a preschool to kindergarten transition symposium. From that learning opportunity, this bridging team developed an initial plan to smooth the transition from preschool to kindergarten for students, families, and teachers. Some of the goals to accomplish this transition include collaboration between preschool, TK, K teachers about understanding a continuum of student learning between the 3 grade levels, along with professional learning on topics such as phonological awareness, phonology, and language development. All of this in order to promote reading readiness and academic achievement. Another goal was to implement bridging practices at pilot school sites. Practices such as earlier and more frequent preschool to K classroom visits for students as well as for parents, and the inclusion of the kindergarten teacher at preschool parent meetings. Finally, we wanted to include family engagement sessions for preschool families that discuss school readiness, social emotional learning, and kindergarten academic success. Our work started quietly, go slow to go fast. Then, as we had opportunities to develop collaboration with ECE administrators and teachers, the work began to take flight. We recognized that this bridging work was so important that it was included as a component of a Head Start grant. Discussions and plans about future professional learning for all 3 grade levels took place. An ECE learning session about phonological awareness for preschool was co-facilitated and was well received. Interest and excitement were growing. Teachers were asking for more learning. Then the coronavirus hit and the work stood still, but only for a moment. The silver lining in the coronavirus crisis is that this pandemic did not serve as an obstacle or deterrent to this bridging work, but only brought the need for our unity into sharper focus. It served as a call for action, which was answered immediately as teachers and administrators sought to work together to serve all students and families in the new ways of distance learning. Some of that distance learning work includes the development of family activities that are centered around oral language development, encouraging parent-child conversations, and other activities that have students playing with the sounds of language, the hallmark of phonological awareness. These are some of the activities that are embedded in ECE choice boards as a part of the distance learning provided by teachers to students and families. The envisioned plan and the bridging work will go on next year with a more united, focused, and stronger bond than ever before. Thank you for listening. Back to you, Nicole.
Sorry. Thank you, Arlen. Tonight, you've experienced a glimpse of this journey that we've been on for the last couple of years. This is a journey that has continued despite our current challenges with the coronavirus pandemic. And while the particulars of next year are still uncertain, what isn't uncertain is that our work will continue, and it will continue across the spans, not only in TK2, but also in 3-5. It will continue through the alignment work that Arlen just described to you. It will continue through ongoing professional learning for our elementary teachers. And it will continue as we begin to partner with SJTA so that we can more clearly capture kindergarten students' incoming knowledge of phonological awareness so that we can then engage in more early intervention and prevention work as we identify a universal screener. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. And at this time, President Villescaz, we're open to any questions you might have.
The presentation. In a moment, I'm gonna call for any public comments on these questions, but just as a heads up to my colleagues, as for previous meetings and for this one and for the items moving forward, I'll just kind of go through our dais order next when taking comments from the board. So I'll be starting with Mr. Hernandez, but first, Mr. Allen, do we have any public comments for this item?
We have not received any email comments for this item. If there are folks in the audience who would like to comment tonight, we would ask that you raise your hand at this time. Again, to raise your hand, you do so by clicking the raise hand button found at the bottom of your screen. For those who are on a desktop device, you may need to click the participants button first, and then you'll find that raise hand button. For those on a mobile device, such as a cell phone, you'll see that raise hand button at the bottom of your screen or perhaps under the more menu. And if you are on a phone dialing in, you can press *9 to raise your hand at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Still seeing no hands being raised. I will move to questions and comments from my colleagues. Mr. Hernandez?
No comments, thank you.
Ms. Costa?
Amberly, and to the rest of the team, thank you so much. It was so good to see children in classrooms, first of all. It brought back great nostalgia. And to Shannon Faltermeyer, congratulations on your new baby. And this is another sign of your continuing dedication that you're on this call with a 1-week-old baby and recovering from childbirth. So thank you. When I saw the item, I was particularly excited about the fact that through 6 superintendents, we have tried to create an articulated program from preschool through elementary. And this sounds like a program that is really, because it is grassroots, because teachers actually saw the need and teachers were working with each other has created an articulation that will allow us to broaden this to other areas. So hats off to everybody who's been working on it. I know as I've visited at schools in the last few years, I kept hearing the comments about needing more for early readers. And I'm so impressed that you found the materials that were right for these students and that you're seeing results. I realize that the COVID crisis has now gotten in the way of you getting full data for this year, but you really are excited about the work you're doing. I know it'll continue when we're back in session, and I'm glad to hear it's happening with distance learning and that you're also having an opportunity to talk to each other. So thanks so much for the work you're doing.
Thank you, Ms. Acosta. Ms. Creason.
Just want to say thanks to the team. Awesome presentation. I loved the video, and I just recently had the opportunity, before social distancing, of course, to see the learning in action. And it was something I had never seen before, the technique that was highlighted in the video. I mean, I really had to take pause to play along with the kids because it's not how I learned. It was magical, and the kids were so engaged. It was amazing. These tiny little guys were just engaged in this learning. So that was exciting to see, and I appreciate all the hard work in this space. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Creason. Dr. McKibben.
Yes, I'm going to ask a couple questions of Mark and Arlen. And Mark, I wanted to start with you. Are you there?
I am, in fact.
Okay. One thing is noticing that and remembering that you were at Howe. I remember one of my first visits as a board member around the schools was to Howe's, both its regular program and its preschool program. And this was, well, 6 years ago, and there didn't seem like a tremendous amount of connection there, and I can see now that has radically changed, and my congratulations to you. The question, Mark, that I had to you was, you talked about work 7 minutes a day, and you also talked about new ways and monitoring progress. Can you give me some examples of the kinds of things that are done in that 7 minutes a day? When you say new way, phonemic awareness has been around for a long time, but it sounds like this is a different take on phonemic awareness. Can you talk a little bit about that, as well as this whole idea of assessing and monitoring growth?
Well, phonemic awareness, you're correct, has been a part of our curriculum from, going back to Houghton Mifflin.
Yeah.
There were always exercises mostly geared towards getting kids to make rhymes and to identify beginning and ending sounds. The thing that I think that's remarkable about this research, and I don't want to get too far into the weeds here, but basically what they've done is new technology has allowed them to track the way the brain retrieves information relating to language. And we have always thought that language, because it was triggered by the printed word, that information about language was stored in the part of the brain related to visual memory. And the reality, as proven by technology, which can show the brain retrieving information, is that information about language, the totality of information about language, is stored in the auditory part of the brain. And that if we can, by using these quick little exercises, establish a roadmap at a very young age for children to retrieve information about language, then they will be able to retrieve it automatically when they are asked to by a printed sentence. And so the 7 minutes a day, there's usually 8 or 9 exercises that we go through, all geared toward a specific element of this, whether it's creating rhymes, identifying first sounds, blending 3 sounds together to make a word, segmenting a word into its individual sound parts. All of these little elements that we've been dealing with individually in little doses for some time are put together into this curriculum that we're using, and you can zip through it, as I said, in about 7 minutes. The real beauty of it, though, is that it requires absolutely no understanding of English. You don't have to know any of the alphabet or anything. You can start it on the first day of school with a child who does not speak a single word of English, never seen the printed alphabet in their life.
That's really great. And what I particularly noticed was the kids were using their whole body as they learned too, and the engagement was just phenomenal. Thank you very much for your for all that you're doing. And it one more time shows how absolutely right we were when we brought the unitary process of the early learning with the early childhood, if you will, in the kindergarten and pre-K together. I'm just really impressed. Thanks so much. Arlen, my question to you you talked a little bit about involving families, and can you give some examples? You talked about a board and some others. Can you give me a few more examples of how the families are engaged in this learning process?
Yes, actually I have several examples. We did have family engagement sessions held this before the virus hit. We had 3 sessions held at Davies. So we had a session on social emotional learning. We had a session on academics in kindergarten, and we also had a school readiness session. We had hoped to extend into another site. Marvin Marshall was going to be next, and we were just kind of cut short. As far as the choice boards, those are distant learning tools for families. It allows them to make choices of different activities that suits their schedule and allows children to continue to learn with language development.
Thank you very much. In terms of your monitoring progress, is there any attempt to try to find out how much more reading is going on in these early learning centers, particularly by parents to their children and that kind of thing?
Well, we do have the discussion about the importance of reading during our family engagement pieces, and that's when we offer tips. But do we actually do any tracking of parent reading at this time? No. Okay,
thank you. Thank you. Again, thank you. This is really impressive, and thanks to the whole team and what you're doing here. Really impressive.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. McKibben. And I want to echo my thanks as well. It was both equal parts affirming but heartbreaking to go back into a classroom. So I appreciate the field trip into a classroom. I cannot wait until that's what our normal life is again. I also just want to thank all the staff for the presentation, and Mark, you in particular. I just really appreciate the enthusiasm with which you presented. You clearly love your work, and it's just another reminder that I know we have a whole army of educators waiting to get back into our classrooms. So thank you all very much for the presentation. To be honest, I was slightly concerned with how to kind of reconcile this with the current environment, but you did a perfect job of doing so. And I have one question for staff around slide 5. To the extent that you can, would you mind expanding a little bit on professional learning cohorts embedded the targeted use of data, kind of a little bit more detail on what that looked like, and then to the extent, if any, that is continuing under our new distance learning
Nicole, I'll let you take
environment.
Yeah, and Kimberly, I can start that question, that response, and then I'll probably pass to Jenny and Esterlyn to give you a little bit more of the particulars about what that looks like, both during the cohorts as they looked earlier in the year and what the team is planning moving forward. But essentially how we've organized our professional learning is that we have grouped teachers into grade bands. So we have a TK2 and 3-5, and those teachers meet 4 times throughout the year. They study the research, they go and they try something in their classrooms, and then they bring an artifact back into the learning space. We started that model last year, so we have a year 1 group, and then we also have a year 2 group. While we have a year 2 group that's new to this work or newer to this work, that year 1 group has continued learning together, and they are actually now serving as models for classroom instruction. So our year 2 folks, or yeah, our this year's cohort, are new ones.
Nicole, we might have lost you.
So at this time, can everyone hear me?
We lost you just a second, but you're back.
Okay, good. My headphones all of a sudden connected for some random reason. I'm not sure why, because they're in the back of the house, but I apologize for that.
So good.
Thanks. At this time, I'd like Jenny and Esterlyn to share a little bit more detail about how you use the data in your sessions, and then what plans you have moving forward while we are still in this distance learning environment to continue the learning. So Jenny or Esterlyn, whoever wants to start, can go ahead and start.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm Jenny, and I work with the 3-5 cohorts. And we started last year on this journey, kind of not totally understanding the impact of phonemic awareness with our 3rd through 5th grade students, but we started looking at assessments and just trying to figure out what are our assessments really telling us, and what information are we not gaining from the assessments that we currently had. So we were reading some Kilpatrick, we were reading some books, and discovered that phonemic awareness was this potential missing piece. And so some of the teachers started trying it in their classrooms, and that carried us through last year. This year we had 2 cohorts running. Our first cohort, they were still meeting with us, but they also served as classrooms where we could go in and take our second cohort. And so they went in, every time we met, we went in, they had an observation, they got to see this work in action, and then we went back for the rest of the day for learning together. And it was really impactful. We did not get to have our final day, so the work that teachers were doing, which, there was a big span of how teachers were implementing, but when we don't get to do the final results. And as for 3 through 5 right now, I know teachers are just trying to get their classes up and running. And so I think this as a potential intervention piece will come maybe starting again next week. And our cohorts will meet again online starting next week. We're kind of giving them a little bit of space.
Thank you very much. Oh,
and I'm Esterlyn Murray, and I am the TK2 primarily worked with. Actually, I'm taking moving into Arlen's spot. Arlen was the TK2 so last year, and as a coach previously at Howe, having worked with Mark Fleming in the past, this kind of movement came on honestly from him, from the teachers. He came to me nearly every day talking about the research that he was doing. So coming into this year, the cohorts that I picked up, there are 2, again, very similar to Jenny, what Jenny has discussed, did very similar things. What we found that in TK2 is that running records weren't enough. They couldn't tell us enough about progress for kids. And so that's part of the work this year, was bringing in data that kind of drilled down. We have a kindergarten group of teachers that are exploring phonological awareness screeners to look at. So that's kind of where we were this year, and with the cohorts. Again, Nicole, I think, mentioned that we were starting that up again as teachers have become more comfortable, I guess, as you can say, with distance learning, and have kind of learned the platforms and how to kind of roll it out. That's been coming up next, and that's why we're starting the next part of this cohort, or the professional development around how are we doing phonological awareness through distance learning now. And there's a lot of sharing that's going on. So we hope to kind of, that's the excitement that's kind of keeping us going.
Thank you very much. I don't have any further questions.
Paula, if I can just share something as well. I know the board appreciated kind of getting into the class through the view of that video. Trent and I were talking today, and we actually want to, I'll be reaching out to you guys in the next day or two to see if you'd like to try and piggyback on a classroom Zoom, reaching out to some teachers to say, hey, would you be comfortable if you had the board coming in as kind of silent observers? So we'll reach out to you and kind of say what class level, what would you like to observe, so that you can kind of see what's going on in the distance learning piece as we're going through this process as well. So I'll be reaching out to you in the next day or two and asking what you'd like to observe. So just an FYI.
Great idea.
Excellent. I'm seeing a lot of affirmative head nods and thumbs up. So I think we're all excited and eager for that invitation. Thank you very much. Thank you again for the presentation, and seeing no trailing comments or any other items for this piece, we will move on. Thank you again to staff.
Thank you.
We are now at item G2, the California Voting Rights Act. Ms. Simlick, please begin when you're ready.
Thank you and good evening, President Velasquez, board members, and Superintendent Kern. I would like to invite Michelle Cannon to discuss this item with the board right now.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Looks like you can. Okay, good. Thank you. Good evening, board. Happy to see you all again tonight. I want to talk to you obviously about the item that is up next, but before we start the discussion regarding the governor's executive orders and the potential pause of the bi-trustee area election transition process, I did want to inform you that last night, Attorney Scott Rafferty sent President Velasquez, Superintendent Kern, and me a 9-page letter, which, among other things, alleges Brown Act violations. That letter was provided to each of you board members prior to this meeting. I'm not sure if you've had a chance to read it yet, but I raise this now as the letter urges you to not pause the transition process at this time and threatens litigation if you do so. So I think it's important that you're aware of it and the allegations contained in that letter as you consider this item tonight. Mr. Rafferty's letter makes a number of assertions, including that the board violated the Brown Act at the closed sessions held on February 25th and March 10th. While we do not agree with the assertions in his letter, we do note that the Brown Act provides for a cure and correct, you've probably heard of that before, of any technical violation of the act when such a violation is alleged. The cure and correct for such violations in closed session is generally either to re-agendize the closed session item and hold it again, or to have the discussion in open session. And this was already done on March 10th when the board adopted its resolution of intent as an agendized open session action item. And of course, it was done again on March 31st at the public hearing, and is happening again tonight as we discuss this matter and the board potentially takes action. Mr. Rafferty desires the board move to bi-trustee area voting in 2020 and not to slow or pause the process. Tonight, the board in open session will discuss whether to continue with implementation in 2020 or whether to pause the process. That open session discussion, this open session discussion, is in fact the cure and correct that Mr. Rafferty demands. We note finally that Mr. Rafferty has also suggested that the superintendent engaged in serial communications with the board members outside of a noticed board meeting to achieve a consensus about the issues that Mr. Rafferty is addressing. That is simply unfounded and untrue, and therefore does not require any sort of cure and correct. With that, I do have just a few slides to present and review with you tonight before you consider the resolution that's before you. Trent, I'm not sure if you can put those slides up for me.
I do not have those slides. Ms. Simlick, do you have those slides?
And I do not have those slides also.
Ms. Cannon, if you can email those to me very quickly, I would be happy to put those up.
Okay, let me, I have them here in a different format that's not gonna let me email them to you. You know what I think will be easiest? There's only 2 slides really that are substantive. So why don't I just walk you guys through them? I think that's fine without reviewing them, if that works for the
Should
board.
also be able to share your screen if you have that.
Yeah, and they're in the packet. So I think if someone could share their screen and just move down to page or to the item.
Let me see if I'm capable of doing that. I'm not very good at Zoom.
Sure.
Here's your agenda. Let's see if I have the packet up. Or someone else might be able to get here faster than me.
I'm on a device where I can't screen share. Otherwise, I would have it up for you.
I'm going to be able to figure this out. Here we go. Okay, now let me see if I can just share my screen. Is it working?
It is. There you go.
It is.
Okay.
That'll
perfect.
do.
Now I need to figure out how I go through here while I'm sharing the screen. Sorry, you guys.
Maybe page down.
I'm trying to, oh, here we go. Thank you.
I think you're in business.
I'm embarrassed by how bad I am at technology. Okay, so the first slide I just wanted to discuss with you is to talk about where we are now and how we got here. So just by way of recap, on March 10th, the board adopted its intent resolution to begin the transition to by trustee election area or by trustee area elections. On March 31st, then you held the first public hearing, and that is called the pre-map public hearing. And that's when we had the demographer attend to make a presentation about all of the sorts of things that might be part of line drawing criteria and criteria for potentially adopting maps. Next up, we had a planned second pre-map public hearing scheduled for April 14th. And then you'll recall that Superintendent Kern pulled that public hearing from the agenda at the time of the board meeting due to the governor's recent executive order that had just been issued, which I'll talk about in a moment. The remaining steps in this transition to by trustee area elections require holding at least 4 more public hearings, adoption of a map, and then a proposal to the county committee. The county committee then needs to hold a public hearing and considers approving the board's proposal. And then assuming that that's approved, the matter then goes to the county registrar of voters to be placed on the election in November. Also, it's not mentioned here, but remember we have a waiver pending before the State Board of Education to waive the requirement that the issue of whether to make the transition or not go to the electorate in November. So assuming that that waiver is granted, that would not be a bar as well. And that is currently pending before the State Board for action at their May board meeting. Oops. Okay, so there were 2 executive orders by the governor. The first one came out March 20th, and it told public hearing timelines related to transition to by trustee area elections. And it referenced that conducting hearings during the current pandemic would be incongruent with public health officials' guidance regarding social distancing. It didn't make any mention of the safe harbor timelines, and I think in prior board meetings I've spoken to you all about that during our public sessions as well. Then more recently on April 9th, the governor issued a second executive order, and this one specifically told the safe harbor timelines. And so when we're talking about the safe harbor timelines, we're talking about the 45 and 90-day timelines that districts have to complete this process, in which if they complete it within the timelines, essentially they're protected from litigation. So the most recent then April 9th executive order specifically said that the governor found that holding these hearings in the near future when California public health requires Californians stay home except for essential needs would threaten public health and safety, and you can read the rest there. And so it really allowed any public entity that was in the middle of considering this transition process to consider whether it made sense to pause as the governor is allowing under his executive order, or to proceed with the process. And just anecdotally, we're aware of a handful of school districts and public entities across California that are somewhere in the middle, not in the middle, somewhere in their transition process right now. A lot of them are much further along than you are. They've already held all their public hearings and they're close to the end of the process. So I think, the options available to districts and public entities are probably different depending on where they are in the process. You are relatively early in the process, but of course we've got a timeline lined out where if you decided to proceed with the process, we'd still be able to make it within the safe harbor provisions. So we have drafted resolution 2991, which is in the board packet and for your consideration tonight. And what this resolution would do would just temporarily postpone the public hearing process until such time as neither the state nor local public health officials recommend or impose social distancing measures. This would be to promote health and safety of community members as suggested by Governor Newsom in his executive orders, and would allow for us to promote greater public participation in the process when it resumes. It also would confirm that the board will resume with the public hearing process once social distancing measures are lifted. So this is truly a pause. It is not a termination of the process. It would just simply put it on pause while the current situation and the social distancing measures are all in place. Questions for me about anything that I just described for you?
Thank you, Ms. Cannon. We'll return shortly to board questions and comments. And before we move to public comment on this item and board discussion, I wanted to add—
Ms. Villescaz, if I might, yes. I might suggest we take a quick recess. We are having some visitor issues that I'd like to address.
Sure. Before we depart, can you just indicate for us, do you want us all to pause and then we'll be reinvited back into the room, or do you want us to wait for a link or to be determined?
So what's going to happen is for our attendees, everybody's going to be placed back into the waiting room. When we're ready to resume the meeting, we will let everybody back into the meeting room. So please give us a few minutes to address a couple of issues, and we will be back with you in a few moments.
Okay, we will be on a temporary Zoom recess. Thank you.
So to our attendees, I want to offer an apology. We did have some folks who came into the room and showed some inappropriate content via video. So to make sure that we had as much safety as possible on the call, we decided to go ahead and restart with a new link, hoping that that might dissuade some folks from being able to rejoin us, as it doesn't look like they were necessarily part of our community coming in to join us for the board meetings. Because of that, we are also going to continue with all cameras disabled. That will help us identify if anybody is trying to enable their camera a little bit easier. So unfortunately, that does mean we will not have video for the remainder of the meeting. And we will go ahead and continue with item G2. And this time I will turn it over to President Villescaz.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. And kind of just to clarify one point that was just made, this was not our preferred method, but we are continuing on, and of course want to do so in the interest of making sure we have continued engagement and access in our modified new world at the moment. We were at item G2, the California Voting Rights Act, and before we move to public comment on this item and board discussion, I wanted to add a statement that I hope will help members of our community and staff understand why this item is even being considered by the board tonight. First, it's important to state emphatically that the board is committed to a transition to elections by trustee area and has been since this conversation began, as evidenced by our resolution to begin the process and direct staff to seek a waiver to certain legal provisions from the California State Board of Education so that the process could proceed promptly and in time for the 2020 election cycle. Based on our past action and discussion, I feel confident that I speak for this board when I say there is no question that San Juan Unified will transition to elections by trustee area, working in full faith and goodwill with our students, parents, and community to honor each voice in the process. Second, we are proud in San Juan Unified to have invested in our efforts to engage more voices in our decision-making process and listen to those voices. We, like other school systems, continue to grow in our efforts to engage the community. And while there is always room for growth and improvement, we have many examples of thoughtful processes that increase participation and decisions that meet the needs and interest of our diverse community. One such example was the very difficult decision to close Citrus Heights Elementary and relocate the Sylvan Middle School program to that campus. It was a process that started with many options being considered, of which exactly 0 made everybody happy. Through a concentrated effort of going into our community and hearing directly from those who would be impacted, we saw a process that began with angry crowds shift to recommendation and implementation that met the needs of more individuals, and today has been embraced by the community as Sylvan is a thriving STEAM school up in performance and enrollment. And when we've had large district-wide decisions, we have a history of working to engage our community in ways that continue to evolve and adapt to bring out more voice. Another example of our evolving efforts around engagement can be seen in our work to build a local control accountability plan that reflects the needs of our students and families who have historically been the hardest for us to engage. By leveraging a network of cultural brokers, expanding the groups and locations where we reach our parents and ensure broad participation by teams for each of our schools, the LCAP process has shown that it takes what it takes to build meaningful input that results in better outcomes for students. All of that is to say, we value authentic voice in San Juan Unified. As we've continued to evolve our efforts to engage more voice from more constituents, we've learned that it is a process that takes a lot of effort as well as time. Governor Newsom's executive order clearly directs local agencies to place the health and welfare of our citizens first and foremost during this unprecedented and critical time in our world's history. This conversation started as a discussion on the transitions to elections by trustee area. Our team rushed to get as much input as possible, as quickly as possible, to this specific question. That is the principle and idea that was brought forward to our stakeholder groups to inform them of our efforts to seek a waiver from the State Board of Education, and that was the discussion both staff and the board have been working to facilitate, even with the restrictions in place. But as we see in many processes, the conversation often grows, and late in the process, an additional question was raised. We have heard clearly the desire from at least one group of constituents in the district to explore not only a transition of elections by trustee area, but also the expansion in the number of trustees areas from 5 to 7. A transition to 7 trustees was not a part of the conversation when this process started. It is not a topic that was vetted with our stakeholder groups in seeking their input to apply for a waiver to election requirements that would have slowed the process down and made it impossible to complete for 2020. To haphazardly bring this item to question and to move forward as if it is all part of the same topic would be disingenuous to our community and is not consistent with how we seek input. A transition to 7 trustee areas is by itself another monumental question worthy of a thoughtful and deliberate engagement by our community. I, as one board member, would welcome the opportunity for the district and the community to have a process prior to the 2022 election that would allow for all voices to be heard in considering whether it is best to have 5 or 7 members going forward. Successfully engaging our community on one of these topics during the time of COVID-19 restrictions would be a challenging task. To add a second critical question halfway through the process robs our community and its citizens of the opportunity to authentically engage and help us reach the best outcome to serve the needs of our families and students. This is not how we do business in this district. Our calls for engagement and input and thoughtful considerations are genuine and not one that I take lightly. It's hard work, but I will defend it at every opportunity. I want to make clear to our community that tonight, that the board is considering pausing this process in alignment with the governor's executive orders, protecting the health and safety of our citizens, not because our commitment to shift to elections by trustee areas has faltered, nor because we are attempting to make a statement on the value of 7 trustee areas versus 5. We consider this item tonight to protect citizens' health and ensure that these vital questions for the future of our community can receive the full benefit of an authentic and engaging process with all interested parties. I'll note in a communication received related to this matter that the fact that other jurisdictions in similar circumstances, including the City of Napa, Napa Valley USD, and the City of Santa Clarita, are still moving forward with proceedings. It should be noted that these communities have not seen the same incidence of COVID-19 that we have here in Sacramento County. Napa County has seen 64 cases with 2 deaths. The Santa Clarita Valley has seen 378 cases with 5 known deaths. This does not compare to what we've seen here in our community, in our county, which has been a high activity area since the start, and our 1,053 cases and 42 deaths. Again, just for comparison, 64 known cases versus 1,053. In addition to these state comparisons, I'll note what I call the Wisconsin case. Recent information indicates that 36 individuals have been infected by COVID-19 when exercising their right to participate in the democratic process and the recent primary election, a figure that is likely to grow as contact tracing efforts are still underway. All of this is to say that this is not an item we take lightly or a risk to public health and safety that we're making up. I refuse to force my community to choose between participating in the democratic process and increasing their risk to their health and their lives. This does not dismiss the question at hand. We are not closing the door to it. We are not bringing a permanent end to it. The governor made it clear today that the path to modifying the stay-at-home order is an urgent effort, but one that will take some time and one that will require local cooperation and coordination. We will continue to work with our local and state partners to appropriately determine next steps. Mr. Allen, do we have any public comments for this item? I see one raised hand. Mr. Allen?
We do have several comments that have come in via email, and I'd like to invite anybody who is joining us in the Zoom meeting live to go ahead and raise their hand at this time if they would like to offer a public comment on this item. Just as a reminder to raise your hand if you are on a desktop device. That's generally found via the participants window, which you can find via the participants button at the bottom of the screen. And then the raise hand button is at the bottom of that participants list. If you are on a mobile device, the raise hand button is at the bottom of your screen, sometimes under the more button. And then, of course, if you are joining us via phone, you can press *9 on your keypad to raise your hand. And we do have several who have raised their hands at this time. President Villescaz, if you'd like to take those first.
I will take them in the order that I've seen them, and that starts with Amy, followed by Scott Rafferty. And just as a reminder, comments are limited to 2 minutes. And Amy, please begin when you see fit.
Good evening, members of the board and Superintendent Kern. Hi, I'm Amy Kasuni, San Juan Unified parent and founding member and officer of our LCAP committee. I realize the district is in the midst of responding to COVID. However, tonight I'd like to speak to you from the heart on behalf of our district's underserved students. Due to LCAP, I've studied the educational outcomes statistics you offered our committee, and it's clear there are marginalized community in this district who need your help and immediate intervention to ensure a reasonable education. I realize interventions are underway, but we all agree more is needed. Please move forward with urgency to implement by-district elections, providing all students and communities with electoral equity. Please consider 2 things. First, due to remote learning, every family currently has access to the board's Zoom meetings. There has never been a more opportune time to hear meaningful input from the disenfranchised in our community. To require San Juan families to attend a board hearing in person at some later date saddles some with a burden too cumbersome to surmount. which is transportation. The most meaningful input can be gathered online now. To do otherwise continues a cycle of marginalization. Next, consider the current executive orders pertaining to the CVRA. Executive orders are not a pass. Orders incongruous with state law will likely be subject to strict scrutiny and consequential judgment by the courts post-shutdown. Choosing to postpone compliance with the Voting Rights Act may have unintended repercussions, including exposure to costly litigation and a potentially invalidated November election. I'd like to add one final note based on Ms. Cannon's comments. While it may be true that there are districts further along in this process, there are others farther behind who have chosen to move forward to comply with state election law. And those districts are right next to us in Folsom, Cordova, and then also in Santa Clarita. I understand Santa Clarita is different, but Folsom isn't much different. I'm asking you tonight to please change your mind and move forward with by-district elections.
Thank you, Amy. One moment, please. Mr. Rafferty's hand's no longer raised, so the next two individuals are David Balahakand and Juan Iniguez. Start with David. David, please begin when you are ready.
Great, thank you. Board members, I want to read a couple of statements out of the San Juan Unified School District 2015-20 strategic plan, and I quote, "Diversity is a valuable asset that strengthens and enriches our community. We will ensure a collaborative connection among students, staff, families, community members, employee groups, and external supports to create and sustain partnerships based on mutual respect, shared needs, goals, and resources." And then under the California Voting Rights Act, it says, "District-based elections shall not be imposed or applied in a manner that impairs the ability of a protected class to elect candidates of its choice as a result of the dilution or the abridgment of the rights of voters who are members of a protected class." Many of you know me. I've been a parent in the district for 15 years. I was a founding member and an officer of the LCAP committee for the district. And for the past 20 years, I've actively worked on behalf of children from low income and disenfranchised families to access and benefit from the opportunities provided by a quality education. I am strongly urging the school board to take the following actions. 1, changes at-large elections to elections by trustee area. 2, increase from 5 to 7 the number of board seats to ensure adequate representation. And finally, hold neighborhood elections this fall when voter turnout is historically high. Any occurrence of racially polarized voting, even when unintentional, is an answerable violation of state law. These election reforms will reinforce the board's published goals, developed with community members, to treat diversity as a valued asset that strengthens and enriches our community, and to nurture a collaborative connection to create and sustain partnerships based on mutual respect, shared needs, goals, and resources. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Balahakins. Next, we have Juan Iniguez, followed by Scott Rafferty. Yeah, oh, go ahead.
Thank you.
Is that your turn? Oh,
yeah.
sorry. Okay, my mistake. Go ahead, sir.
This is Juan. I'm going to deviate a little bit from my written comments. You know what I find disingenuous is the claim that we sprang the 7-member board member discussion on you. There's 2 reasons why it's disingenuous. 1, we've been raising this issue since early March, when almost from the moment this whole discussion got started. And 2, the process for doing by-district elections allows for mapping meetings that give consideration to how we set up our districts. I cannot believe that conceptually throughout that process, you can't raise the question about whether 5 or 7 districts are appropriate for this district. I'd also add that the reason we want 7 districts is because we need to have representation for areas that are traditionally unrepresented and at risk. I'm speaking specifically of the West Side, Encina, and I'm speaking specifically of San Juan, Citrus Heights. Those areas need representation. The other thing I'd like to say, more directed to my comments, is that the governor's orders did not prohibit you from moving forward to implement neighborhood elections. The executive orders express concern about community participation during this period of social distancing. However, the past 2 San Juan board meetings have shown technology allows for robust community participation. At least 2 virtual board meetings in neighboring Folsom Cordova voted to continue moving forward on this issue. Failure to move forward could open San Juan up to expensive legal challenges and jeopardize the validity of the 2020 elections. Failure to proceed with the implementation of neighborhood elections in a timely manner serves neither our students nor our community. Thank you.
Thank you. The next 2 hands that are raised are Scott Rafferty and Magali Kincaid. Mr. Rafferty, when you're ready.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can, we can, yes.
Well, Amy said a very important point. Never before in history has every family in this district had internet access. And you are the one agency of government that could have, as we requested, put leaflets in with the reduced price lunches. You could have had outreach. Your resolution says that you did have outreach. Your outreach was, by the standards, norms of other districts, extremely poor. You even have the audacity to say that on the 31st, there weren't enough speakers. But you won't produce the written comments, which we have requested. You won't post them. These are not just Brown Act violations. They're real, more fundamental than that. They're violations of your oath of office. And you're passing something here which is going to mean that we will not have a lawful election. That is the most fundamental job of a board. The teachers have very time-critical tasks. The staff, the classified staff, have very time-critical staff, but you can't claim to have any task that's more important than assuring that in December, there is a lawfully elected board. Maybe if there had been trustee areas, when you close Citrus Heights, if there had been a trustee anywhere near Citrus Heights, you wouldn't have had angry mobs. You would have had an understanding that they had a negotiator that made their case, that knew their circumstances. And that's what this is about. Before you changed your commitment to proceed to implement this year.
Mr. Rafferty, your 2 minutes is up if you'd like to conclude your remarks, sir.
So I call upon you to honor your commitments and honor your oath of office.
We have 2 more hands that are raised here in the Zoom meeting. Ms. Kincaid, followed by a username with the name Alba Tennis. Ms. Kincaid. Ms. Kincaid, you might still be on mute. There we go.
Yeah, someone had to unmute me. Thank you. Buenas noches, good evening. My name is Magali Kincaid and I'm a parent in the San Juan Unified School District. I offer my strongest objection to your efforts to pause on the district's March 10th commitment to comply with the California Voting Rights Act. I agree that community engagement is a priority and should always be a priority. I encourage you to use this effort, moving from at-large elections to a by-district election process, as an opportunity to practice relationship building with new communities, deepen your current relationships, and explore other unique ways to define what community engagement may look like moving forward, given that we're unclear as far how long COVID-19 may last. And just as we're doing right now with distance learning. There are vulnerable students and communities whose voices are not meaningfully represented or included in decision-making. This lack of representation directly affects their school engagement and their ability to receive a quality education. So I urge the board to continue their adopted timeline and comply with the CVRA in time for the November 2020 elections, and consider having a 7-member board so that every area of San Juan Unified, which is extremely large, is covered. Thank you.
Thank you. We now have Alva Tennis, and if there's anybody else who would like to speak, please indicate by raising your hand at this time. Alva Tennis, feel free to begin when you see fit.
Hi, this is Clarissa Alva, and sorry, I couldn't figure out how to.
That's okay. Hi, Clarissa.
It's like frozen. I just wanted to share that I think it is important to wait at this time. I agree with the board's decision. After hearing many of the people that made the statements, I think it's very important. I'm someone who lives on the West End and works in a school on the West End. There are still many inequities. We still have families without internet, not because the district hasn't supplied it, but because of access. We are still trying to reach families. So we can't just assume that all of the families in our district are aware of this change and are ready for it. We need to do much more community outreach. There is a lack of representation from many areas. I do agree with that, but we need to reach out to those communities first before making such a big decision.
At this time, I do not see anybody else indicating a desire to speak through the raise your hand function. Mr. Allen, did you have any that you intended to read per our guidelines, or?
We do have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. We do have 13 folks who have submitted comments via email that have not spoken tonight. If it is the pleasure of the board, I would be happy to read those.
And I just want to make sure we're as consistent as possible. They were all submitted after 6 p.m. per what is stated on our publicly available document.
They were.
Okay. If it's the pleasure of the board, I'll give my any of my colleagues a quick second to object. Otherwise, I would ask that you read all of them. Seeing no one wanting to speak or indicate otherwise, please begin.
Thank you. Our first is from Timothy Irvine. Hello, I strongly support moving to by-district elections this year, 2020, rather than continuing to wait. I believe that the board should go from a 5-member at-large elections to a 7-member by-district elections. Smaller districts lower the barrier to entry for underrepresented groups, and districts themselves ensure that there will be at least some territorial dispersion of members. In general, the sooner this change happens, and the more and the smaller the districts, the better. The board could have done this a decade ago or 2 decades ago, but has not. Now is the time to act. The board should act quickly to engage the community for feedback on by-district elections maps, and then agree upon a map that improves the representation for all communities in San Juan Unified School District. I saw the board suggest somewhere that the use of Zoom or other video meetings prohibits community engagement at present. This argument does not make sense to me given the fact that more people can now participate because they do not have to physically show up to an in-person meeting. Legally, it seems that the board is violating California Voting Rights Act, CVRA, by agreeing and then changing their mind on moving to by district. It seems like this is an issue that should have been taken care of a long time ago, and it does not make sense for the board to continue waiting. Our next comment is from Patricia Johnson. Good evening, members of the SJUSD board and Superintendent Kern. My name is Patricia Johnson. I spoke at a previous board meeting on the importance of by-district elections on March 10th, 2020. I wrote an email for another board meeting, March 31st, 2020, kindly read aloud by Mr. Allen. I thought the board was going to go through with the by-district elections. There were to be hearings and meetings discussing the maps and setting up the districts in time for the November 2020 general election. It is so wrong to deny poor and minority students an equally great education as at the best schools in the district. It is unconscionable and undemocratic to deny and to delay implementation of by-district elections now. This 2-year delay will adversely impact students. It will be costly, and voters will not want to re-elect members who seem to be more interested in saving their seat than for the good of all the students. All students deserve a high-quality education. You're doing it at some schools, and my children got a terrific education. You can do this at all the district schools by having by-district elections. Thank you. Our next comment is from Tom Nelson. Good evening, President Villescaz, board members, Superintendent Kern, Ms. Cunningham. A concept that applies to this issue is safety in numbers. The concept of safety in numbers can enlighten our understanding of reasons for choices as well as behavior. 16 school districts have applied to the State Board of Education to move from elections that have been at large to elections by trustee area. In at least some cases, the reasons are to avoid costly litigation or to reduce expenses. Is San Juan USD an outlier? It has been. Nearly every school district our size is already by trustee district. Being an outlier has cost our district over $30,000 in fees. That is money that has not gone to children. Questions worth asking are, is there a potential our district will continue to be an outlier? Will we incur additional costs for not complying with the CBRA in a timely manner? Is it more judicious to do what other school districts are doing? Safety in numbers is not always good. A desire to seek approval from others may lead to a lack of conviction and a lack of courage. An absence of dissension and meaningful debate, as exemplified in the voting record of this school board in recent years, is an indication that board members have been adopting opinions of fellow board members instead of the interests of diverse communities in our school district. An objective of the CBRA is to prevent limited perspectives and opinions among elected representatives. Board members should connect and learn about community concerns among their local neighborhood constituents. Competing ideas and perspectives on this school board will create challenges. Challenges inspire growth. It is through growth that we will reach excellence. Thank you. Our next comment is from Robert Bernstein. I'm opposed to board item G2. This issue should have been dealt with many years ago. When I ran for the San Juan School Board in 1997, their proposals to have by-trustee area elections, there was at least one option for areas presented in an article in the Sacramento Bee that year. The public needs chances to have their voices heard and make them put their comments in writing if they can't speak at meetings. I think by now there should have been a few options, draft trustee areas for people to review and comment on. I think they need to concentrate on keeping each area of the district together as much as possible. Thank you. Our next comment is from Edward R. Franco. Good evening, members of this board and Superintendent Kern. My name is Edward Franco, and I offer my strongest objection to your efforts to renege on this district's March 10th commitment to comply with the California Voting Rights Act of 2001. While it is imperative to focus on responding to the coronavirus/COVID-19, there is also a duty to act when there are communities and students who lack representation, which directly affects engagement and their ability to receive a quality education. Implementation of neighborhood elections by November 2020 is not a superfluous action, even in these perilous times. Neighborhood elections, by providing direct representation, are the fulcrum upon which a great democracy rests. They also provide all voters, irrespective of their race, language, place of birth, and/or income, with the most direct way to have a say in policies that most directly affect them. Neighborhood elections will provide diversity of thought and change that could lead to a change in underperforming schools. And yes, neighborhood elections will provide direct focus on those policies that dictate how we fight this pandemic locally. The governor's March and April executive orders do not prohibit a district from moving forward in implementing neighborhood elections. The executive orders rightly express concerns about community engagement during this period of social distancing. However, as the past two San Juan board meetings have shown, technology has allowed for more robust community participation. Failure to proceed with the implementation of neighborhood elections in a timely manner serves neither our students nor our community. Comply with the CVRA in time for the November 2020 elections. Thank you. Our next comment is from Damaris Canton. Good evening, President Villescaz, Superintendent Kern, board members. The board's decision to renege on its March 10th, 2020 commitment to abide by the timelines of the California Voting Rights Act is yet another reason that as a community, we have no trust in the word of this board to do the right thing because it's the right thing to do and in the best interest of the students you say you represent. This board took a world crisis and used it to hide. I'm appalled. This really doesn't have to be this hard if we all are truly on the side of what's best for all students in SJUSD. Thanks. Our next comment is from Sam Alavi, to whom it may concern. I'm writing to support moving to by-district elections in 2020 instead of continuing to wait. The COVID-19 pandemic has done nothing but show the communities of color that communities of color are underrepresented in every part of government, and we cannot wait any longer to rectify that. By increasing the number of members and making the election by district, we are increasing the opportunity for diverse representation on every level. The board should act quickly to engage the community for feedback on by-district elections and maps, and then agree upon a map that improves the representation for all communities in San Juan Unified School District. Thank you. Our next comment is from Aaron Miner. Good evening, board members, and good evening, members of the board and Superintendent Kern. My name is Aaron M. Miner, and I offer my strongest objection to your efforts to renege on the district's March 10th commitment to comply with the California Voting Rights Act of 2001. While it is imperative to focus on responding to the coronavirus, there is also a duty to act when there are communities and students who lack representation, which directly affects engagement and their ability to receive a quality education. Implementation of neighborhood elections by November 2020 is not a superfluous action, even in these perilous times. Neighborhood elections, by providing direct representation, are the fulcrum upon which a great democracy rests. They also provide all voters, irrespective of their race, language, place of birth, and/or income, with the most direct way to have a say in the policies that most directly affect them. Neighborhood elections will provide diversity of thought and change that could lead to a change in underperforming schools. And yes, neighborhood elections will provide direct focus on those policies that dictate how we fight the coronavirus. The governor's March and April executive orders do not prohibit a district from moving forward in implementing neighborhood elections. The executive orders rightly express concerns about community engagement during this period of social distancing. However, as the past two San Juan School Board meetings have shown, technology has allowed for more robust community participation. Failure to proceed with the implementation of neighborhood elections in a timely manner serves neither our students nor our community. Comply with the CVRA in time for the November 2020 elections. Thank you. Our next comment is from Robert Longer. Good evening, members of the board and Superintendent Kern. My name is Robert Longer, and I offer my strongest objection to your efforts to renege on the district's March 10th commitment to comply with the California Voting Rights Act of 2001. While it is imperative to focus on responding to the coronavirus, there's also a duty to act where there are communities and students who lack representation, which directly affects engagement and their ability to receive a quality education. Implementation of neighborhood elections by November 2020 is not a superfluous action, even in these perilous times. Neighborhood elections, by providing direct representation, are the fulcrum upon which a great democracy rests. They also provide all voters, irrespective of their race, language, place of birth, and/or income, with the most direct way to have a say in the policies that most directly affect them. Neighborhood elections will provide diversity of thought and change that could lead to a change in underperforming schools. And yes, neighborhood elections will provide direct focus on those policies that dictate how we fight the coronavirus. The governor's March and April executive orders do not prohibit a district from moving forward in implementing neighborhood elections. The executive orders rightly express concerns about community engagement during this period of social distancing. However, as the past two San Juan board meetings have shown, technology has allowed for more robust community participation. Failure to proceed with the implementation of neighborhood elections in a timely manner serves neither our students nor our community. Comply with the CVRA in time for the November 2020 elections. Thank you. Our next comment is from Carrie. Dear members of the board and Superintendent Kern, my name is Carrie Asbury, a resident of the district in Arden Arcade. I'm voicing my objection to the board reneging on their commitment to comply with the California Voting Rights Act of 2001. I'm very familiar with the need to create equity and neighborhood representation as a community organizer that helped put the measure on the ballot for the district elections in the Twin Rivers School District and in the creation of the map that the district ended up using. I know the California School Board Association recommends the boards take action voluntarily. The boards take this action voluntarily, where the boards and districts have more control over the process and formation of the districts rather than have it mandated by a ballot measure. If the board does not move forward on this action, as it should for their own interest as well as for the justice for the neighborhoods served the San Juan Unified School District, the community will be forced to bring the action forward themselves. Based on my experience, this can result in higher costs and the board having to accept a map that they did not have the time to negotiate between themselves and their community. This is not an issue of if it is the needed for the community. The law and precedent has already determined that. This is an issue of whether the board would like to promote equity and representation for their constituents. I implore you to consider your delay and instead move forward with this action, doing right by your communities and allowing for meaningful input by yourselves and the community on how to best implement the change and the district maps. Thank you. Our next comment is from Amar Shergrill. Dear members of the board, as board member of several organizations representing Sikhs in the Sacramento area and in your district, I object to your efforts to halt compliance with the California Voting Rights Act of 2001. Despite the current public health crisis, your district has a duty to the communities and students that lack representation. This directly affects engagement and their ability to receive a quality education. Implementation by November 2020 is within your means and should be pursued robustly. Neighborhood elections provide direct representation and provide all voters, irrespective of their race, language, place of birth, and/or income, with the most direct way to have a say in the policies that most directly affect them. Neighborhood elections provide diversity of thought that provides the best chance for improvement in underperforming schools. The governor's March and April executive orders do not prohibit your district from moving forward and implementing neighborhood elections. The executive orders rightly express concerns about community engagement during this period of social distancing. However, as the past two San Juan board meetings have shown, technology has allowed for more robust community participation. Failure to proceed with the implementation of neighborhood elections in a timely manner serves neither our students nor our community. Please comply with the CVRA in time for the November 2020 elections. Our next comment is from Holly Ramsey. Ms. Ramsey's comment does go past our suggested limit of words, so I will read up to our word limit on this comment. Members of the board and Superintendent Kern, offer my strongest objection for your efforts to renege on the district's March 10th commitment to abide by the timeline highlighted in the California Voting Rights Act of 2001. In late March and April, you and the governor were morally correct to focus attention on combating the spread of the coronavirus. However, the business of governing must continue when the critical issues and well-being of our students and community are at stake. Implementation of neighborhood elections by November 2020 is not a superfluous action even in these perilous times. Neighborhood elections, by providing direct representation, are the fulcrum upon which a great democracy rests. They also provide all voters, irrespective of their race, language, place of birth, and/or income, with the most direct way to have a say in the policies that most directly affect them. Neighborhood elections will provide remedies to policies that lead to underperforming schools. And yes, neighborhood elections will provide direct focus on those policies that dictate how we fight the coronavirus. The governor's March and April executive orders do not prohibit you from moving forward to implement neighborhood elections. The executive orders rightly express concerns about community participation during this period of social distancing. However, as this past two San Juan board meetings have shown, technology allows for robust community participation. At its last two virtual board meetings, neighboring Folsom Cordova Unified voted to continue moving forward on this issue. Failure to move forward could open San Juan up to expensive legal challenges. Failure to proceed with the implementation of neighborhood elections in a timely manner serves neither our students nor our community. The need in this district is too great. When I fought for help for Del Paso Manor, almost every person in the district told me that they hadn't been there in years. And unfortunately, that meets the limit of our public comment for written comments. The remainder of that comment will be shared in full with the board after the meeting. And our final comment is from Marina Sabiniano. And I apologize for the pronunciation on that name because I'm sure I did not get that right. Good evening, members of the board and Superintendent Kern. On behalf of the Latinx Young Democrats of Sacramento County, I write to request the board move forward to comply with the California Voting Rights Act of 2001. While it is imperative to focus on responding to the COVID-19 pandemic, there is also a duty to act when there are communities and students who lack representation, which directly affects engagement and their ability to receive a quality education. Neighborhood elections, by providing direct representation, are the fulcrum upon which a great democracy rests. They also provide all voters, irrespective of their race, language, place of birth, and/or income, with the most direct way to have a say in the policies that most directly affect them. Neighborhood elections will provide diversity of thought and change that could lead to change in underperforming schools. We urge you to act swiftly to comply with the CVRA as soon as possible. And President Villescaz, that concludes the submitted comments via email.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. We are now moving to board members questions and comments on the item. Again, for ease, I'll be just calling in diaceting order. So I will begin with Mr. Hernandez.
Thank you. For me, it's very unfortunate to hear words like renege, disingenuous, and no trust. If COVID-19 were not upon us, we would not be having board meetings via Zoom. We would not have our students schooling via distant learning. We would be having graduations, proms, award ceremonies, sporting events, and doing many things that are normal. We are not in normal times. To think we could get necessary feedback, input from various community partners, students, and parents' voice in these pandemic times is baffling to me. I support doing the right thing with the right timelines. I support the superintendent on this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hernandez. Ms. Costa?
I could not have said it any better, Mr. Hernandez, and I concur. I strongly agree with Trustee Arias, and I did at the first board meeting when we discussed this. And at that board meeting, I talked about the need to involve as much of the community as possible, that it really makes a difference. Tonight's board meeting, where we had to take a lengthy recess due to unfortunate behaviors of people not within our community, tells me that although this platform allows people within our community to talk, it also allows people outside of our community to interrupt. I agree with Governor Newsom in his statement that by moving forward, it would force Californians to choose between fully participating in their democratic process and safeguarding their own health and safety, as well as the health and safety of their communities. I know that I am not out and about hearing from community members like I normally am, and am not at school sites hearing from community members. And I feel a real sense of loss for that informal connection. But I also feel a sense of loss for the formal connections where we're able to get out and talk with community members. And for that reason, I really believe that we need to press pause and move forward when we can involve all of our community members. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Costa. Ms. Creason.
Thank you, President Villescaz. So I have a question and a couple of thoughts and comments. And so lots of threats, came through during public comment. So I'm turning to our attorneys to ask, help me understand our exposure based on what we're doing, what's being proposed here.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk to you about that a little bit. So again, under the California Voting Rights Act, there's the safe harbor period. And it's a 90-day period to complete the process, right? And if you do it within the 90 days, essentially you can't be sued to comply with the CVRA because you've made the change within the safe harbor. The governor's order pauses that safe harbor, so that safe harbor is going to continue on until the social distancing measures are lifted and until his order is lifted. It states in the order that it will remain in place until further notice. So this safe harbor is going to continue on, which means that the district remains in the safe harbor until the order is lifted, and then the time will continue. I think I mentioned last time that also the 90 days won't start over, but wherever we were in the process when the first governor's order was issued, and I think we had determined that 10 days had already passed. So when it resumes, you'll have 80 days essentially under the law to complete the process. Some of the threats that you heard, and certainly threats that were in the letter that I mentioned tonight from the attorney, include potentially, regardless of whether you're in the safe harbor or not, seeking legal challenge in courts, either for some sort of injunctive relief, for invalidating whatever election you hold in the fall, and then of course threatening litigation over alleged Brown Act violations. So those are all things that it's hard for me to tell you, yeah, there's a lot of exposure there, or there's not, because we don't even know what those challenges might look like. So all I can really say is that we're confident that you've complied with the Brown Act, that if there's any need for cure and correct, that is happening via the public discussions that have gone on and that are occurring tonight, and that you will remain in that safe harbor under the CVRA until further notice.
Okay, that's really helpful. I appreciate that. I have another question that's probably for you. The 5 to 7 issue, which is very, very separate. It's my understanding moving from 5 to 7 is not a decision the board can make unilaterally. Like, this has to go to voters. There's certain things that have to happen beyond us voting on it, correct?
That's correct. It's a similar process. You would need a waiver from the state board, and you'd go through a very similar process. Sometimes they are done together in tandem. Sometimes they are not done together. They're done separately. So it's really a separate issue. It can be done at the same time, but as I think some of you mentioned tonight, and also at a prior meeting, you'd be really rushed to get all of the public input and participation that I know you want if you were to look at the 5 to 7 issue now and try and get that in place before the November election as well.
Okay. Okay, so I'm just going to throw out some thoughts, and I want to make this clear, and I've said this in other meetings. I'm 100% supportive of moving to by district. 100%, that's not a question. Yes, we need to do that. I was very hopeful, and I think I said it at the last meeting, really hopeful and excited about the possibility of using Zoom, to outreach to folks. The comment was made, that we have more technology in students' hands at home right now than ever before, which is 100% true. But where I'm having a hard time squaring that is we didn't solve the digital divide. That still exists. There's still access barriers for a variety of reasons. And where I have a hard time, this is a huge decision to make. The maps being drawn, it is a huge decision. And I'm not sure that relying on Zoom is a good answer. That's really what it's coming down to for me. I don't know that I can put this whole process on Zoom. And I think today was a really good example of things going really, really wrong. And then I'm thinking about, our folks that English is a second language. These families don't necessarily show up to our, that are still speaking. We're not getting everyone we need to reach. And that really concerns me too. The idea of pausing, let me say this. I mean, I understand that the thought and the idea upsets people, but COVID turned the world upside down, and we're not exempt from that in any way. I'm just having a hard time squaring, you know, when we've done such robust outreach in other areas for other reasons where we, I heard a comment about, you know, expecting people to show up, and absolutely we can't rely on that. But I'm thinking a combination of techniques, you know, surveys, Zoom meetings, we show up at schools. We have schools that are showing up at apartment buildings. You know, there's a lot of different outreach and engagement that's been going on. And I think that's going to take a variety to really get the robust participation that we need on such a huge decision. And to say that it's okay to do a fraction of that and we're going to rely it all on Zoom is really hard. Okay, so those were all my thoughts. Let me see if there's any other. I think that's enough. That's enough for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Creason. Dr. McKibben. Dr. McKibben? Oh, there you go. Now we can hear you.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yep.
Let me
That's
say
okay.
that I am the fifth of 5 board members that has just now said we endorse by trustee elections. That has not changed, and we would like to, and we hope that we will continue with as much haste as we can for that. However, that some have considered the 20 or 30 people tonight and other people as masses. We are a 40,000 student district. When we have looked at different kinds of issues, such as early start times, we had more than 8,000 people that had participated in our various kinds of electronic and meetings and so forth. The moving from 5 to 7 things, which may have great merit, indeed deserves that kind of robust discussion in a time when we are in, if you will, pretty much a lockdown. We're not going to get that kind of participation that I think this subject deserves. I am very eager to see the new maps. I'm very eager to move to trustee districts because I do believe we will be a better district as a result of that. I don't know if that's the case by moving from 5 to 7 members, so I think it deserves a very rich, very extensive, very thoughtful discussion. Under the current conditions of stay at home, and under the timeline that we are in, I don't think we can have that robust, extensive, thoughtful discussion. It's worthy of that, and we should do that. We may well be better with 7. I don't know that, but I want to have that discussion. Tonight, as Board Member Creason just said, and so did Board Member Costa, we see the limitations in this kind of electronic process. I too am worried that on our maps, that I'm very eager to see whether we can adequately figure out those maps using the Zoom technology. Maybe we can, maybe we can't, but I am worried about that, and I'm worried about those, particularly those people that the people have very ably talked about tonight, being able to talk about the districts that they are in and their interest and so forth. I think that we are unfairly accused of reneging and things like that. All 5 of us, you heard again, none of us have hesitated on that thing. Where we want to have more discussion, where we think that we need the voice of lots of more, not just 50 or 100, but lots more people is on this question of moving from 5 to 7. If not, I believe we could very quickly finish this process. But I am concerned that this thing that has happened once in the last 100 years is being diminished and in the way of somebody wanting to get elected. And that bothers me a lot. I know that there are 2 members of this board that are basically in those categories of concern and told to stay home. One's a diabetic and one's a cancer survivor. I am insulted that people think that we are doing something when, frankly, I've lived through a typhoid epidemic, a dysentery epidemic, and had to work in that and know how tough these things are. This is scary stuff. Let's not diminish it. Let's give it the kind of, again, thoughtful, extensive, broadly based, using all of our forms of technology to make sure that we have done the right thing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. McKibben. I gave my statement up front. It's fairly lengthy, but I think a lot of my colleagues have made a number of good points, of which I all concur with. I'm in concurrence with. The only thing I would add is kind of this suggestion that this 5 to 7 question was always part of the original question. That did not come up until well into, I think it was even noted that it didn't come up until our March meeting where we had an agendized item, and we had already been underway to put all of that into action prior to the stay-at-home orders for the month of February in response to the demand letter that we received at the beginning of that month. So to suggest that the timeline is in sync and that we are the ones somehow creating this bifurcation in the question is just, it's wrong, and the timeline doesn't fit that. So that's the only thing I wanted to add. I think my statement before covered everything, and I want to thank my colleagues for their thoughtful remarks. I don't see any raised hands or anyone indicating a desire to speak. So at this moment, we do have a resolution for consideration. Is there a motion to adopt resolution number 2991, declaring an intent to temporarily postpone hearings related to the board's transition to by-trustee area elections until such time as neither state nor local public health officials recommend or impose social distancing measures due to the COVID-19 pandemic?
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved by Dr. McKibben. Is there a second?
Second.
It has been seconded by Mr. Hernandez. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye. That was unanimous. I'm going to give folks a quick opportunity to speak up otherwise, but that was unanimous, given our current platform. Okay, that was a unanimous vote. We are at item H, board reports. Are there any board reports?
I do have. As you know, CSBA canceled Ledge Action Day, and they have asked that the delegates from Region 6 hold Zoom meetings with our various representatives. So Dr. McKibben and I met along with numerous other board members from other districts with Taisha Watts from Dr. Pan's office. And then the next day we were scheduled to meet with Assemblyman Cooley, and due to an unexpectedly long phone call, he had to cancel, but will be rescheduling with us. Next week we have meetings with, or this week we have meetings with Kevin Kiley and Kevin McCarthy. And then on a sad note, Joe Ferreira, who was the Associate Superintendent of Special Services in San Juan, passed away. He is left by many family members, including his wife, Ruth Nashon Ferreira, who Ruth was a principal at Twin Lakes and Trajan Elementary Schools. So again, we have lost another great member of the San Juan community. Thank you.
Are there any other board reports? I'm going to give my colleagues one moment. Okay, seeing none, my quick report, I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge also another passing of the San Juan community. Early last week, I learned that Guy Roberts passed away, and while he was not my teacher while I was at Mariloma, I know a lot of my peers had him, and he commanded very great respect on the entire school site. You didn't even have to be in his class to be affected by his presence. He really had an he really had a presence across the whole school, and he dedicated a number of his lives, a number of years of his life to making that a fantastic learning environment. And I just wanted to acknowledge his passing and thank him publicly for his service. Moving on. We are at item I, future agenda items. Do any board members wish to add any items to the future agenda? Again, given our new platform, I'll give my colleagues a moment to take themselves off mute. Seeing none, we are at item J, visitor comments. Mr. Allen, are there any remaining visitor comments?
We have not had any additional email comments, so if there is anybody in the room who would like to offer a comment on an item that was not on tonight's agenda, now would be the time to raise your hand.
Okay, seeing none and there being no further business, we are adjourned.